Welcome to Pankinen Financial Perspective with Ashton Pankinen from Pankinen Financial Group. Planning for your financial future means navigating challenges like market volatility, inflation, and retirement income. Pankinen Financial Perspective is here to help by addressing common financial concerns, sharing valuable strategies, and exploring ways you can work toward your financial goals. Now let's get started with Pankinen Financial Perspective.
Hello and welcome to Pankinen Financial Perspective. My name is Ashton Pankinen from Pankinen Financial Group. If you'd like more information about what you hear during our show today, give us a call, 952-873-2703, or visit us online at pankinenfinancial.com. That's Pankonin financial.com. And while at my website, click on the radio page to check out past shows, to subscribe to our program on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or Amazon Music. Also, while at my page, click the link at the top to get the latest retirement guide. Today, we're talking about one of the most underused tools in personal finance, health savings accounts, or HSAs. And specifically, we're going to dig into the tax advantages that make them so valuable, not just for covering healthcare costs today, but potentially as part of a long-term financial strategy. For the first part of today's conversation, we'll be drawing from Fidelity article titled HSA Triple Tax Advantage Plan Explained. And later in the show, we'll be pulling from an Investopedia piece called Understanding Health Savings Accounts, Benefits, Rules, and Limits, which covers some additional ground worth knowing. And as usual, I'm very glad to have my co-host Tony Shore here with me today.
All right. Well, I'm happy to be here, Ashton. And I'll tell you what, people might think, oh, HSAs, this sounds boring. I don't need to know about that. And that's just a health account. Why would I care about that? I will tell you right now, and I don't think I'm overhyping it, it is the only tax designation in the entire tax code, the IRS, where it's triple benefit for you, the user.
Correct.
It goes in tax-free, so you get a tax deduction off your earnings putting it in. You don't pay taxes on that money.
Yep.
It grows inside the HSA tax-free, and it comes out tax-free. And it is the only account or tax designation that offers the triple benefit. And people think, well, it's just for healthcare. Wait, we'll tell you why this is so valuable. Ashton, I know you're going to explain this to us. So yeah. I'm excited about this one. Listeners, make sure you pay attention to the show. But first, I have to tell you, I was joking around with Ashton before the show. And anyone who knows Ashton is such a nice guy. For our listeners out there, I wanted to tell you, if you don't know Ashton, really nice guy, which is why I have to tease him. I have to come up with ways to joke around with Ashton. And for some reason, Kevin James and his movie Paul Blart Mall Cop came up. So I this morning was calling Ashton Pankinen Mall Cop. But you know why that doesn't work? I just realized you grew up in Windham, Minnesota.
Yep. Southwest Minnesota down there.
Southwest. I grew up in the Southwest Minnesota. But Windham didn't even have a mall. So how could you possibly have become a mall cop?
Yeah, and they still don't have a mall.
No, they never have had a mall. I mean, for a brief period, they had a Shopko.
Yes, they did.
And then that's gone. Yep. That's gone. So
Pomida turned into Shopko. Pomida first, yeah.
Pomida, which is the people. Now we're aging ourselves.
Now we're getting old here.
yeah. Pomida. Hey, I'm old enough to remember Tempo. Do you remember Tempo stores?
No, but I do remember Ben Franklin in our downtown.
You had a Ben Franklin. We had a Woolworths. Worthington had a Woolworths, a Ben Franklin, and a Tempo. And Tempo, it was like Target or Kmart. And I used to buy record albums there as a young lad. I'll never forget when I first started collecting records. That's where I go to buy records. And I still remember buying a couple specific records there that I got. So it's a great memory for me. And I put those records on and I go, I remember going into Tempo with my mom and buying this record. But anybody who remembers the Tempo store, now I believe there's it was close over there by Dairy Queen, and there was a Snyder Drug. Do you remember Snyder Drug?
Oh, yeah. Snyder Drug.
Yeah.
I was actually back home this last weekend. We had Riverfest as the town celebration in Windham, and went down there and hung out with the folks, and my sister and her family came down too, and my other sister was there. Well, I've got a couple sisters that live in town there too, and went to the parade, and they had fireworks, and
nice.
It was fun.
Yeah, that's fun. Yeah, Worthington has turkey days.
Okay. Gobble, 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 gobble.
Yeah, exactly. They have turkey races, by the
Okay.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is just
That's
insane.
illegal, isn't it? Most places.
Well, to bet on it. Yeah. Yeah, there will be. Remember, kids, no wagering.
Yeah, no wagering on these turkey races. So,
Well, hey, and when people hear health savings account, maybe they think that's just a basic tool. That's a dedicated account for doctors' bills that go along with some of these high deductible plans. But I'm guessing there's a lot more to it than that, right?
yeah, there really is. A lot of people have an HSA through work. They contribute a little and they use it to cover copays, maybe some deductibles, which is fine because that is a legitimate use. But they're often not taking full advantage of everything that the account could offer. And when you understand the full picture, it's a pretty remarkable tool. So let's start with eligibility. Not everyone can open an HSA, and that's worth clarifying up front. To contribute to an HSA, you need to be enrolled in what's called a high deductible health plan, or HDHP. And that's a specific type of health insurance with a higher deductible than a traditional health insurance plan, meaning you may pay more out of pocket before the coverage kicks in. And in exchange, then your premiums tend to be lower. A lot of people nowadays are choosing those types of plans just because health insurance premiums are getting kind of up there.
Yeah, that's one way to get them lower, but you do have a much higher deductible and you have to pay more out of pocket until the insurance kicks in.
Correct. Yep.
You don't get the $25 or $50 copays. You're paying the full doctor's bill every time you go to the doctor until you reach a certain amount, typically.
Exactly. And so you can open an HSA through your employer if they offer one, or through a financial institution directly, as long as you meet those eligibility requirements. So step one, if you're curious about an HSA, is to check whether your current health plan qualifies.
So once you've cleared that hurdle and you get into the right health insurance plan, what makes an HSA worth paying attention to?
3 words: triple tax advantage. And again, that's triple tax advantage. I want to spend some real time on this because each layer of that advantage is meaningful in its own. And together, they're genuinely hard to match in any other savings vehicle. So the first advantage is on the contribution side. When you put money into that HSA, those contributions could reduce your taxable income. And how that works depends on how you're actually contributing. If your employer automatically deducts the HSA contributions from your paychecks, those dollars go in pre-tax, so they're not included in your taxable income to begin with on that W-2. You don't need to do anything extra at tax time for that benefit. It works the same way as 401k contributions, again, as a paycheck deduction.
So you're already saving money before the IRS gets involved.
Exactly. And if you're making contributions on your own with money you've already paid taxes on, those contributions are tax deductible when you file your return. And so what may be especially nice is that you don't need to itemize your deductions to actually claim them. And so you can take the standard deduction, which most people do, and still deduct those HSA contributions on top of that. And then here's a bonus worth mentioning. If your employer contributes to the HSA, those dollars are excluded from your taxable income as well. So ultimately, you're getting a tax benefit on money you didn't even put in yourself.
Yeah, it's huge. What are the contribution limits for 2026? Because I know there are limits, right?
Yeah, there are. And it's much like the IRA contribution limits. They kind of increase over the years to adjust for inflation. For 2026, the IRS limit is $4,400 if you're an individual coverage, individually covered under the health insurance, and then $8,750 if you have family coverage under an HSA eligible health plan. Any contribution your employer makes counts towards those limits, so you want to make sure you factor that in as well. And if you're 55 or older, you may be eligible to make additional catch-up contributions of up to $1,000 per year. And if your spouse is also 55 or older, they can make their own catch-up contributions, though they do need to open their own separate HSA to do so.
Interesting. I did not know that. So that's layer one. What's the second tax advantage?
The second is tax-deferred growth. Once money is inside that HSA, it can grow tax-free from federal income tax. And this is where a lot of people leave real value on the table because many assume an HSA is just a checking account for health expenses. And depending on your HSA provider, you may be able to invest those contributions into stocks, bonds, ETFs, which are exchange traded funds, and mutual funds. And what that means is the money just doesn't sit there earning nothing. It could grow over time, and you're not paying taxes on those earnings while they remain in the account. There's also another strategic element worth naming. A lot of people use their HSA as a pass-through. Money goes in, money comes right back out for those health expenses. And that is a valid use for it. But if you can cover routine health costs out of pocket and let that HSA grow untouched, invested, that long-term compounding effect could be very significant. And so again, the tax deferred growth layer is what makes that possible.
Right. And I want to reiterate what you just said. This is so important. If you can manage, if you don't go to the doctor a lot or have a lot of expensive health problems, and you can manage to cover your healthcare costs on your own and max out that HSA, don't touch the money, let it grow, make sure it's in a growth account, then in retirement, the average couple will spend over $300,000 on healthcare costs in retirement. And that's in addition to, they think, no, I have Medicare. No, even with Medicare, you will out of pocket probably spend close to $300,000 if you're 65 and older and you live 20 plus years in retirement for a couple, and long-term care. And this can be used for, HSA isn't just for a doctor bill. You can use pretty much anything a pharmacy sells is covered. And so aspirin, prescriptions, co-pays, anything that Medicare premium, if you want to use HSAs for anything medical related in retirement, you'll have this big fund of money to use. And now we get into the third advantage, which is where all that growth pays off, right?
Yeah, you nailed it there, Tony. The third advantage is those tax-free withdrawals that we're talking about. When you use your HSA money to pay for those qualified medical expenses, those withdrawals are completely tax-free. No income tax, no penalties, and you can take them at any time. The money goes in with that tax benefit. It grows without being taxed, and then it comes out without being taxed. And that's that triple tax advantage. And it's genuinely unique in this tax code.
Yeah. And so let's talk about what qualifies as a medical expense. I imagine a lot of people aren't sure where that line is.
Yeah, and it's a broader list than most people expect, and it includes those doctor visits, specialist appointments, diagnostic work like blood work, imaging, CT scans, and MRIs. For dental care, it can be for cleanings, x-rays, and other procedures. Vision care, the list includes eye exams, glasses, and contacts. And then we've got prescriptions, physical therapies covered, hospital costs are also included, and even over-the-counter medications. Like you mentioned, if we go to the pharmacy, some of that cold medicine, pain relievers, flu treatments from your local pharmacy may qualify for that. And then also one that really gets overlooked is travel for medical care. That's one people rarely think about. Ride share to a doctor's appointment or a flight and hotel to see a specialist in another city are costs that could be covered by your HSA. And so the list is generally wide, and most people have more eligible expenses than they realize.
Yeah, I've heard about crazy things that you can cover with your money from your HSA. And boy, if you can sock away the maximum into that HSA and leave it grow and don't touch it until you're retired, it is huge. And I realize not everybody's going to be in a situation to do that, but wow, that's amazing. So before we continue here, I know people will have questions about this. How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, the best way to do that is to give our office a call, 952-873-2703. Again, that number is 952-873-2703. You can visit our website, pankoninfinancial.com. That's PANKONIN financial.com. Schedule a complimentary consultation. And here's why I bring up retirement in the same breath. If you're in relatively good health and can afford to pay those qualified medical expenses out of pocket in the short term, you could leave your HSA contributions invested and let them grow untouched for years. And by retirement, you could have accumulated assets designated for that future healthcare expenses. I know we talked about up to $300,000 is kind of what they talk about. And also, once you reach age 65, the rules shift in an interesting way. Not only can you use your HSA money for medical, but you can use it for anything. And if you withdraw for non-medical purpose, you just pay ordinary income tax, similar to a traditional IRA. So if you're concerned about, I might not have that much in medical expenses, again, you can use it as a traditional IRA, basically, where you get a tax deduction for contributing to it. It grows tax deferred. And then if you're 65 or older, you don't pay any penalty to take it out. And so that means this account essentially becomes a supplemental retirement account, tax-free for healthcare and taxable, but penalty-free for everything else. And that offers a lot of flexibility.
So it sounds like the HSA could really serve double duty then as a health expense fund and a retirement savings vehicle, a lot like an IRA.
Yeah, that's a very good way to frame it, Tony. There's one more feature from Fidelity Piece worth mentioning before we shift gears: the ability to reimburse yourself for past out-of-pocket expenses. And on this, there's no deadline. If you paid a medical expense out of pocket 2 years ago while your HSA was open, you could reimburse yourself from the account today, as long as you didn't already claim that deduction for it or get reimbursed through another account. So the key is you're going to have to keep your receipts for this. So hang on to that paper and digital copies and store them somewhere where you can find them if the IRS ever asks for them.
Wow, that's a huge detail. So that's another thing. I didn't realize that you could go back. So you can let the money grow, and then after it's grown, take it out tax-free and pay old bills with it. That's unbelievable. Just save those receipts. That's a useful detail. So you mentioned we'd be turning to a second source for the last half of the show. What are you looking at here?
Yeah, we've been drawing from a Fidelity article on HSA tax advantages. Now I want to bring in some additional context from the Investopedia piece I mentioned at the top of the show. Understanding health savings accounts, benefits, rules, and limits. Because as useful as the triple tax advantage is, there are some rules and trade-offs that are equally important to understand, and a few of them can catch people off guard.
Let's start with the trade-offs. What's the flip side of the requirement?
Yeah, it's a fair question. A high deductible health plans come with lower premiums, which is appealing, but the deductible itself is real. For 2026, the minimum deductible to qualify for a HSA is $1,700 for an individual and $3,400 for a family. And then the out-of-pocket maximums are significant as well, up to $8,500 for an individual and then $17,000 for families. So the financial benefit of the high deductible plan structurally really depends on your personal situation. Just like much of our planning, everything comes down to your own situation. Yeah, so if you're generally healthy and have the cash reserves to cover the high deductible when something comes up, it could make a lot of sense. But if you have ongoing health needs or you struggle to cover large out-of-pocket expenses, the math does look different. And that's a conversation worth having with someone who understands your full financial picture.
What about the penalty rules? You mentioned earlier that withdrawals for qualified expenses are tax-free. What happens if you use the money for something else?
Yeah, this is really important and something we should understand before you open the HSA. If you withdraw HSA funds for non-qualified expense before age 65, that withdrawal is subject to ordinary income tax plus a 20% penalty.
So you don't want to use it for a non-medical reason before you turn 65, basically, because the tax plus a 20% penalty, ouch.
Yeah, that's a meaningful hit, not a small fine. Even an IRA or a retirement account is a 10% penalty, but the HSA is a 20% penalty on top of whatever income taxes apply.
Oof.
And again, once you turn 65, that 20% penalty goes away. And at that point, non-qualified withdrawals are simply taxed as ordinary income, just like a traditional IRA. That means this penalty risk is really a concern for the years before retirement. So again, the practical takeaway here is that the HSA funds shouldn't be treated as an emergency slush fund. They're more powerful when they're used for what they're designated for and to let grow.
Are there other penalty rules that we need to know about here?
Yeah, one more that doesn't get enough attention is excess contributions. So if you contribute more than the IRS annual limit to your HSA, those excess contributions are subject to a 6% excess tax each year until they're corrected. And it's worth knowing the limit going in, especially if both you and your employer are contributing. That's where it can be a little confusing. If they put in $750 and you put in the 8,750, now all of a sudden you're over that limit. And so you want to make sure the combined total stays within that cap.
You don't want to pay that 6% excise tax. That's huge. So now let's talk about Medicare. I know some listeners are approaching that age and thinking about how that interacts with their HSA. And maybe I'm not understanding this fully. So do you know about that one?
Yeah, I do. And again, before we kind of get in this answer, I want to remind everybody that our office has a health insurance specialist, Medicare specialist, and so kind of know quite a bit about this here. And so once you enroll in Medicare, you can no longer make contributions to the HSA. That cutoff happens as of the first month of Medicare enrollment. And accordingly, if you're approaching age 65 and still working with a high deductible plan, it's worth being thoughtful about when you enroll, because the moment you do, you can't make any more contributions. They have to stop.
Yeah.
And so that said, you can still receive tax-free distributions from your HSA for qualified medical expenses after enrolling in Medicare. The account doesn't go away. You just can't add to it anymore. And as we mentioned, after 65, you could use those funds for non-medical expenses too, just paying ordinary income tax on those withdrawals. So while the account remains useful, you'll want to plan around that contribution cutoff.
Yeah, that's a good point to note. So you're saying you can only make contributions up until age 65, or when you enroll in Medicare, and then you can no longer contribute to an HSA. But the beauty is, if you have time before you, like, let's say you're 55, you've got 10 years or younger.
Yeah.
You've got all these years to contribute as much as possible to that HSA. Let it grow. Make sure it's in a growth account. And then it rolls over. It's not like a flex account where you lose it each year. You don't have to, it's not use it or lose it. It stays in there. It's always going to be in there. So you'll always have that money to use. You're never going to lose that money, but you can't contribute anymore.
Once you hit that Medicare, once you start taking Medicare. Yep.
Yeah. So, and you touched on the FSA comparison earlier, the flex accounts, and I just mentioned that. Maybe you should do a quick side-by-side on that.
Yeah, both HSAs and FSAs allow you to set aside pre-tax money for medical expenses, but there are some meaningful differences. FSAs are employer-sponsored plans, which means the account belongs to your employer, not you. So if you leave your job, you typically will forfeit whatever's left in that account unless you elect COBRA, a continuation of coverage. And HSA is yours. It travels with you when you change jobs. Contributions roll over year to year with no use it or lose it rule. And as we've discussed, you can invest the funds in long-term growth. FSAs generally don't offer that option. And a lot of times they don't allow you to roll them from year to year.
No, no.
Yeah. One other notable difference is self-employed individuals can contribute to an HSA as long as they meet the eligibility requirements. FSAs typically are only available to employees. So for anyone working independently or owning their business, the HSA may be a better fit.
That's another good point. You're making a lot of great points today, Ashton. This is really good stuff to know. And I think a lot of people don't know all the ins and outs of these. What else jumped out at you from that Investopedia piece?
Yeah, one that people don't really think about until it matters is what happens to your HSA when you pass away. You know, if your spouse is the designated beneficiary, the account transfers to them and continues to be treated as an HSA, which means they get all those same tax advantages. So if they need to use it for medical expenses, it's tax-free. If they're over 65, they don't incur that 20% penalty. But if the beneficiary is someone other than a spouse, the account is no longer treated as an HSA at that point. The beneficiary would be taxed on the account's fair market value. And so for estate planning purposes, it's worth thinking about who you've named as your HSA beneficiary.
I knew that there was some way to pass it along, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
And your spouse gets all the same benefits. They would get it as an HSA. But if you and your spouse both pass, then whoever's a contingent beneficiary would have to pay taxes on it. And I think that's a detail most people probably haven't thought through.
Yeah, most haven't. And again, it's a good example of why it helps to look at the HSA not just as a spending account, but as a financial asset that fits into the broader plan that includes retirement, taxes, and yes, eventually even those estate considerations.
Yeah. Again, that's why you got to work with a financial professional. It's a lot of moving parts. You've got your contribution limits, your investment options, withdrawal rules, Medicare timing. Now you're talking about beneficiary designations. This might not be something a lot of people can realistically manage on their own, correct?
Yeah, some people can, especially if they're detail oriented and willing to do the research. But for most people, the complexity sneaks up on them. And it's not any single rule that is hard to understand. It's just more of all of them that interact with each other. And decisions you make in one area can affect another. Take Medicare timing, for example. If you're still working at 64 and contributing to that HSA, the month you enroll in Medicare matters because contributions have to stop at that point. And so if you don't catch that, you could end up with excess contribution and a tax penalty you weren't expecting. A lot of times we'll fully fund that HSA for the year. If we start enroll in July,
Sure.
we might fully fund that HSA for the year. So again, it's exactly the kind of thing a financial advisor can help you plan around.
And what about the investment side? I think that's an area where guidance could make a real difference. That's the area where I would get confused.
Yeah, and it really could. I've got a lot of clients who stop by and their contributions are actually sitting in cash. They've got a pretty substantial sum, maybe it's 30, 50,000, and it's just in a cash account, not earning anything. And some don't even realize that investing is an option. So again, a financial professional can help you think through the investment strategy for your HSA that's consistent with your overall risk tolerance and timeline because of how you invest inside the account should probably reflect where you are in life. Some HSAs make you keep $1,000 or $2,000 in cash and you can invest the rest. Someone in their 30s with a long time horizon could afford to take more risk with those funds than someone who's 5 years from retirement.
And I imagine the retirement piece with taxes and retirement income, that's where things get most complicated, correct?
Yeah, that's where it tends to come together. How does an HSA fit alongside your 401k, your IRA? Are you better off drawing from the HSA first in retirement or preserving it specifically for healthcare cost? What's the right sequence strategy for your tax situation? Those are all questions with that don't have a one size fits all answer. They depend on your income, your health, your other assets and goals. Having someone in your corner who understands all those pieces and how that HSA fits into a bigger picture could help you better understand how HSAs fit in with your overall financial, tax, and retirement planning consideration.
Well said. A lot of great information in today's show. We're out of time. Before we go, let our listeners know one more time how they can reach you, Ashton.
Give us a call, 952-873-2703. Again, that number is 952-873-2703. Or visit us online at pankoninfinancial.com. That's PANKONIN financial.com to schedule a complimentary consultation.
All right, and that does it for today's episode of the Pankonin Financial Perspective with our host, Ashton Pankonin.
Thank you for joining us for Pankonin Financial Perspective. Don't head into retirement without a plan for both your finances and your health. For more information, contact Ashton Pankonin at Pankonin Financial Group at 952-873-2703 or visit pankoninfinancialgroup.com. Join us again soon for another episode of Pankonin Financial Perspective. Advisory services are offered by Ashton Pankonin LLC DBA Pankonin Financial Group, an investment advisor in the state of Minnesota.
All matters discussed during the show are for informational purposes only. Each individual situation may vary and the opinions expressed here may not apply to everyone. Materials presented are believed to be from reliable sources and no representations can be made as to its accuracy. All ideas and information should be discussed in detail with one of our qualified representatives prior to implementation. We are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration, the Federal Medicare Program, or any other government agency. Calling this number will direct you to a licensed sales agent.